Hello students, in the last presentation I have covered till the survey research. In this presentation, which is our chapter 2.7, I will cover psychological testing, reliability, validity, norms, types of tests and case study. Psychological testing. Now see, assessment of individual differences has remained one of the important concerns of psychology from the very beginning. So, psychologists have constructed different types of tests for assessment of various human characteristics, or we can say attributes, such as intelligence, aptitude, personality, interest, attitudes, values, educational achievement, etc. So, these tests are used for various purposes, such as personal selection, placement training, guidance, etc., in multiple contexts, including educational institutions, guidance clinics, industries, defense establishments, and so on. So, if you have heard of psychological testing earlier, then it will be easy for you also to understand that what a psychological test consists of. And for those who doesn't know what a psychological testing means, that means a psychological test basically is conducted in order to assess the attributes of a person that are regarded to be intelligence, aptitude, personality, interest, or attitude, and so forth. Okay, so here it is important for you to know that a psychological test contains a number of questions which are called items. So, in a psychological test, certain questions or certain statements are used, and those questions or statements are regarded as items. Okay, and there are also certain predetermined responses are there. So you will see there are already certain answers are there, which are known as the probable responses, that are related to a particular human characteristic or attribute. So it is important to note again here that the characteristic for which a test has been developed should be defined clearly and unambiguously, and all items, that means questions, should be related to that characteristic only. Unambiguously means there should not be any double meaning. What the test intends to measure, it should have that validity. So in order to define a psychological test, it means a psychological test is a standardized and objective instrument which is used to assess an individual's standing in relation to others on some mental or behavioral characteristics. Here we get two terms. One is the standardized and another is objective. Objectivity I have already explained while we were doing the characteristics of scientific research. So here again, when we are saying standardized, of course it is scientific. Psychological testing is scientific. That is why objectivity comes into scene once again, where we mean objectivity as if two or more persons independently study a particular event, both of them to a great extent should arrive at the same conclusion. Okay, now in order for a psychological test to become an objective measure, it is essential that items should be worded in such a manner that they communicate the same meaning to different readers. That means unambiguous. Okay, so even the instructions to the test takers about how to answer the test items should be specified in advance. And the procedure of administering the test, such environmental conditions, time limit, mode of administration, individual or group should be spelled, and the procedure for scoring the participants' responses need to be described. So these are certain points to remember in order for a psychological test to become an objective measure. See, a psychological test is regarded as a systematic measure because it involves detailed analysis of items, and estimates the reliability, validity, and norms of the whole test. Now let us see what does reliability, validity, and norms mean when we say that a psychological test is a systematic measure. So reliability basically means that results are consistent. So the reliability of a test refers to the consistency of scores obtained by an individual on the same test on two different occasions. Okay, so for example, suppose a test is designed to measure the typing ability of a person. Okay, now if the test is reliable, we would expect a student who receives a high score the first time she or he takes the test to receive a high score the next time he takes the test. So in order to check the reliability of a test, we have to consider the test twice with a gap of interval. Okay, so we have to give the same test on two different occasions, but the test will be same. So we have to see that if at a first attempt the person is scoring high, whether he or she will score the same score next time the test is given to the person. Understanding the point? So there are two types of reliability. Okay, first is test retest. Now test retest reliability indicates the temporal stability or stability of the test scores over time. So it is computed by finding out coefficient of correlation between the two sets of scores on the same set of people. Coefficient of correlation we have done already, isn't it? Where we basically check that whether the scores are being correlated with each other or not. So test retest is done on the same set of people with a specific time gap. Second is split half. Now split half reliability gives an indication about the degree of internal consistency of the test. And this is based on the assumption that items of a test, if they are from the same domain, should correlate with each other. If they are from different domains, for example oranges and apples, then they would not. So for finding out the internal consistency, the test is divided into two equal halves employing odd even method. For instance, items 1, 3, 5 in one group and items 2, 4, 6 in another group. And correlation is computed between the scores of odd and even items. So basically the name itself suggests split half. That means we are dividing it. Okay. Next term we have is validity. Validity generally refers to the ability of a test to measure what it was designed to measure or what it intends to measure. So for example, if you have construct a test of mathematics achievement, whether the test is measuring mathematical achievement or language proficiency. That means if today you have maths exam but question comes from English, you will get confused and ultimately the test will not be valid. Similarly, if you have English exam but question comes from maths, certain sums comes, then of course it's the same thing. The test is not measuring what it is intending to measure. Yes? So similarly, if a psychology exam included questions such as what is the square root of 647 or who wrote the Tale of Two Cities, it would not be a valid measure of your knowledge of psychology. Yes, similarly, when we are talking about psychological test, so if a test is designed to measure intelligence of an individual, it should measure the intelligence of the individual rather than measuring his or her personality. Similarly, if we have to measure the personality of an individual, we should measure the personality only, not the intelligence of the person. Okay. Next we have norms. So a test becomes a standardized test when norms are developed for the test. A norm is the normal or average performance of the group. So it is the standard of comparison for the test results developed by giving the test to large well-defined groups of people. Basically it means that whether someone fits to the population or not, population of that performance group or not. Okay. Similarly, in the slide you can see there is a diagram and a T shape is there. Under that T shape there are certain triangle, circle, square, yes, and under it it is written which cube can be made from the above diagram. Now if you roll this T in certain shape, you will get a square and you will get certain diagram from the options below. Option 1, 2, 3, 4. So which cube will be forming from the T shape, that you find out whether the answer is there or not, whether the norm fits or not. So the test is administered on a large number of people and their average performance standards are set based on their age, sex, place of residence, etc. And these norms are set basically because it helps in comparing the performance with others of the same group. If we are having, if we are setting a standard of norm based on their age or sex, of course we will have to bring the population which belong to that age and sex. Yes. So if we are developing a test with norms, like we need a population who are males from 12 to 18 years, and on the other hand we need a population of age 18 to 20 years females. So of course if we are setting up these norms, we cannot bring in something which is not there in the norm. We cannot bring children over there if the norms is standard for a certain age group and also sex. Yes, gender, that means. Now let us see what are the types of psychological tests. There are certain types of psychological tests. First, on the basis of language, we have again subdivisions. The first one, it is verbal test. So a verbal test demands understanding of written words and responses are also written over here. Therefore, they can be administered to literates only. For example, Stanford Binet IQ test. Second, we have non-verbal tests. In non-verbal test, items are made of symbols or pictures. So use of language is limited to instructions only. Only for the purpose of giving instruction, language is used. Other than that, the subject have to just use items that are made of symbols or pictures. For example, Raven's progressive matrices test. And third, it is performance tests where they use concrete object like blocks or puzzles. And testing requires physical manipulation of the material in a particular order. And they do not involve language. So performance tests can be used with illiterates as well as literates. For example, course block. So here, this is an example question of Stanford Binet IQ test where the person needs to read and understand. It is written, which of the below images are the most similar to the ones above? Because it is involving a question over here, an illiterate will not be able to read it, as a result will not be able to answer it. Here is an IQ test item in the style of a Raven's progressive matrices test. So this is an example of Raven's progressive matrices test where 8 patterns are given and the subject must identify the missing 9th pattern. Here this instruction is given with the use of language. Other than that, the person just have to look at the picture and figure out which is the missing item over here. And the third one is one of the performance test, which is basically cube construction test, also known as the course block. Here the person just have to manipulate the material in a particular order as shown with certain cards. Certain cards are there where certain design will be there, and the person just have to look at the design and have to manipulate the cubes accordingly. Second, on the basis of mode of administration, we have at first individual tests. So an individual test, as the name itself suggests, it is administered by the researcher to one person at a time. Okay, so there is face-to-face interaction involved in individual test, and they can be answered orally or in written form or manipulating an object as in performance tests. So it is conducted on one person at a time, and based on the language they can use verbal test, non-verbal test, as well as performance test, and they are used for diagnosis and remediation of individual learning difficulties. So individual tests are time consuming but are important ways of getting responses from children and from those who do not know the language. A person who do not know the language, for them also it is uh, easy to understand and cooperate under individual test. Under individual test, rapport formation is also there. That means the person gets to interact face to face with the researcher or the person who is conducting the test. And second, it is group test. So group test, as the name again suggests, that it can be administered to large number of persons at the same time. Here instructions about answering the items etc. are written on the test, which the test taker reads and answers the questions accordingly. So here the test administrator explains the instructions to the entire group at the same time. Okay, group tests are easy to administer and are less time consuming. Of course, now if in one setting only we can conduct the test to a large population, of course it is less time consuming than individual test. But the drawback is that in group test we cannot form rapport, because there individually we will not go to each person and we will not have face to face interaction which is involved under individual test. So there it's kind of a limitation over there in group test. Third, on the basis of difficulty level, we have speed test. That means in a speed test there is a time limit within which the test taker is required to answer all the items, and evaluation is based on the time taken to answer the items accurately. So all the items in the speed test are of the same degree of difficulty. Okay, so there is limitation of time. Suppose you are given 1 hour, so you have to try to complete the test within 1 hour, not more than that. And that is why the degree of difficulty remains same under the speed test. Second is power test. A power test assesses the underlying ability or power of the individuals by allowing them sufficient time. That is, this test do not have any time limit. Okay, and the items are generally arranged in an increasing order of difficulty. So if a person is unable to solve fifth item, she or he will have difficulty in answering the subsequent items. Getting the point? In power test there is time limit, that is why the degree of difficulty remains same over the entire test. But in power test there is no time limit, and that is why the degree of difficulty, it is in an increasing order. Okay, you all play games, isn't it? So there, after crossing one level, there are subsequent hard levels, no? So that those are the power tests. Okay, so here also in this test, power test, there is this increasing order of difficulty. So majority of the tests are a combination of both speed and power test, since it is difficult to construct a pure speed or power test. Next we have case study. So a case study is a technique in which one person is studied in depth. So it is basically a reconstruction of the past. So in this method, one individual is studied using multiple measures, and the goal is to provide an in-depth descriptive account of some phenomenon. So in the case study, focus is directed to a particular case. It can be individual and not the method of analysis. Okay. So various methods of analysis are combined to gain information. A case study may utilize interview, observation, and psychological test. That depends on the researcher, what method he or she wants to take. So it is a valuable research strategy in the fields of clinical psychology and human development. Case study, they provide a narrative or detailed description of events that took place in a person's life. And multiple sources of information are used in case studies. Those unique aspects of a person's life which can't be duplicated for practical or ethical reasons. For example, an accident, terminal illness, etc., are captured by case study. Okay. So the case study should not be generalized as they depict a life history of a particular person only. So basically, what is a case study? It is an in-depth study of a person, because here we focus on a particular case. It can be it particularly means a person, an individual, and not the method of analysis. Okay. So in order to study a particular person and related to his or her case, the researcher may use various methods of analysis with the combination to gain information. Okay. So here, if you are studying the case history of a person, it is to remember that we should not generalize his or her life history to another person, because that uh, everyone we know about, isn't it, that every individual is unique. So the case of one person, it is unique to that person only. We should not generalize it to another person. Understanding the point? So here are some of the examples of case study. So we can take single organization, that is school, which might involve what is happening with a particular tool or strategy. Then a particular community, it may be a rural village ongoing issue or dispute. Then on a particular group, that is issue to a group. Then an individual, career criminal, examination designed to understand motivations of a career criminal. Then a decision, merging to two schools, why was decision taken, how was it implemented, what was the outcome, or an event, an election campaign. So these are all examples of case studies. Now see, each method that we have gone through so far has their own limitations and advantages. Therefore, it is desirable that the researcher should not depend only on one method. Rather, a combination of two or more methods should be used to get the real picture. So one can certainly be more confident if the methods converge and give the same results, isn't it? So far, from your exam point of view too, the psychological testing and the types of psychological test is very important, which I have just covered. And then you also have to know that what does it mean by reliability, validity, and norms. And lastly, case study, which I have covered in this presentation. So go through this presentation once again and try to understand and make it more clear. If you have any doubt, you can ask me.